Right, we move on to item 9, and we have Graham and Omakua. Thank you. Welcome, welcome.
Kia ora koutou. Yes, we're here to report across from Te Wakanga Mukiuta, and I'll hand over to Amakura first in a minute, but essentially we're looking at noting our reports and acceptance of those. We're taking them as read, and if we get any questions, but I'll hand over to Amakura first.
Morena koutou mā. Just to present to you a follow-up on the initial report that was submitted earlier in March of this year to the Governing Board and Independent Māori Statutory meeting, which advised that it would respond to the September Finance and Performance Committee. That's since been delayed to be part of this group of reports. And it basically follows up on one of the key strategic areas around strategic alignment and the findings that were noted in the report. So are there any specific questions to the report?
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman. Kia koutou tēnei wā. Thank you for the report. So it's a bit hard to say much because the plan of November the 13th, which is the draft plan that's to be submitted to the ELG, is really what we need to see. So I'm not really sure, apart from what we're really reporting on here, until we get that document. I mean, we've seen there's some alignment, but I certainly haven't got a grasp on anything in terms of what's concrete, and it's not really going to happen until after that November 13 meeting. So when will we get to see that in terms of this committee?
It is planned to be, in terms of the Finance Performance Committee, we are reporting to it twice a year now, which is the half-yearly meeting and the year-end meeting. But it will be going to the governing body and independent statutory board meeting in the end of November.
Okay. But this committee not till, through you, Mr. Chairman, till what?
It would be May of next year.
So in terms of the commitment by the LTP, in terms of the 3.5 per annum that was going to be reprioritised, how's that going to be incorporated? What work's been done on that too? Work program.
I think there's a substantive amount of work that has been put together across the whole of the organisation. I'm aware that there are 4 strategic priorities that are going to be focused on as part of the 3-year work plan going forward. And it will also highlight the activity that's working across the other strategic outcomes. I think in the other full report that you will receive later this morning, that will give you an indication of some of the work that's already underway and that will be focused on as we move forward.
So I just note, Mr. Chairman, as I say, it's a little bit difficult because we're pending a work program. I mean, just not sure what's been reported today, really. Just if someone can help me, I'm happy to be made clearer.
Yes, well, this report is related specifically to the PricewaterhouseCoopers findings, and so we're trying to keep things sequential in relation to how we're organising ourselves and the activity that is happening around the delivery of Māori outcomes, so that we're in a better position to report effectively on those.
Through the chair, if I may.
So Rose was going to be next on the next to talk about outcomes.
If we want to answer this question now, I think the Māori Outcome Steering Group is focusing now on the 4 strategic priority areas that the Executive Leadership Group have prioritised for the next 3 years for that extra 3.5 million. So those are Te Reo Marae Development, Māori Economic Development, and the fourth one is water. So in looking across those 4 areas, the biggest need is in the Māori economic development space. So that is where we're really focusing our effort right now as a team on finding where in that space is there really, what are the programs that are ready to go and are they robust. So we can't report that to you right now, but just to let you know, we can't report the final outcome of that, where we're heading with that extra expenditure, but that's where the real gap is. And that's where we really need to focus our effort on making sure we've got programs that are going to deliver on that. And your IMSB business cases gave us quite a good steer in that regard, and we're taking those on board. So unfortunately, we can't report the outcome yet, but that's where we're heading, if that helps.
Thank you.
Right, well, Councillor Cooper.
A little question, kia ora. I just wondered, because I mean this is a big ask, a big task right across our whole family, and I've been a bit involved with you, Graham, on trying to work on the outcome of Maori cultural identity stuff at Corbin. What's the pathway, you know, because we're out in our communities and we might see opportunities to fulfil on some of these strategies, what's the pathway to realising that stuff? Is it just to go through your team or in general? You know, because it seems like we say, here, go and do it, but, you know, sometimes I think at the, you know, political and community level there might be opportunities.
Yep,
We seem to struggle a bit to get there.
in response, there are programs that are being stood up as we speak. So some of that's waiting for policy completion, but there's definitely Te Waka Angamua driving some of that, and then there's distribution of some of that budget out to parts of the group that will be able to identify and take that forward. So, you know, we've got initiatives in the marae space, for example, that have started up through Ops, and there are some initiatives that have started up through Te Waka Angamua as well. But that's the pathway at the moment, and we're putting ourselves through business casing and you know, that IG type infrastructure which council has developed as a way to launch projects and monitor them to completion.
If I could add to that, we're also establishing program leads, and they will be recognised to have a broader view across the whole of the council group and in those strategic priority areas. And we'll be working very hard in communicating that across the council group, so that if there is a groundswell from the community or other parts of the council, in the first instance, they would be the person that they'd look to go to promote their initiative.
That's helpful. Kia ora.
Councillor Cashman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, team. Later on our agenda, we're hearing from our CCOs, and they have some considerable paragraphs around what their work they are doing to uplift their Maori outcomes, yet it's not sort of mentioned much in your report. Is there a reason for that?
We have stated that the Māori Outcomes Steering Group are working with them about how we can collect that information to represent the whole of the council group around those strategic priorities that supports their individual reporting as well. So you get a group view around the key strategic areas and then their specific view. And we're hoping that as a consequence of that, they'll lead some of those strategic priority areas as well.
Okay, so the alignment's being tested ongoing.
Yes.
But through the chair, you do actually have the following report has a lot of activity in what the CCOs have been doing. Yep.
Thank you.
Have a move and a seconder, please. Oh,
Can I ask a couple more questions?
Yep.
So, I just have to say that the other day I met with CCOs, CEOs, because I felt like we're going like, and there's no shot at anybody, I think we're going around in circles, I feel like it. And so I've asked for some clarity around getting on with 4 of the key themes and Te Reo and Marae development, economic development, and specifically around water. And I'm expecting a report to our November joint meeting to be very clear about where we're going with this, and the CCO to be very clear about the responsibilities and the roles they have. Because honestly, I felt the other day, through Mr. Chairman, there's still a lot of confusion going on about who's doing what, and even through the CEOs, it was seemed that, you know, they would all agree on stuff and then all of a sudden get to the next meeting and not sure who agreed on what. And so I'm confident of this basis that I'm expecting a report for the joint meeting that we can act on, because I'm struggling on this, I really am, and it's just probably me, but I really am. So I just wanted to put that out, Mr. Chairman, because I just want to get on with doing it, and it's, you know, I'm trying to ask myself, right, who's Māori Outcomes Group? Who makes that up? I mean, I know Te Toa Takatini, the ELT, Mr. Wakangama are doing lots of stuff and getting made to do lots of stuff where everyone needs to be doing it. But I'm just not sure who Māori Outcomes Group is. Who is that?
Through the chair, we, in response to the PwC report, we needed a group of people who are fairly senior in council from across the group. So it includes people like ourselves and from CCOs who actually got core responsibilities in their job descriptions for delivering or participating or furthering Māori outcomes. So those people come to the meeting and actually help shape the program for the executive leadership team to sign off on. This is a new group. It started about 6 months ago in response to the PwC report. We'd just been lacking that before, so everybody was doing their own thing, to be honest, and the group's in its infancy. It has its terms of reference. It's shaping up the program now. And so that we can come to you and say, well, if the executives are giving a lead on those 4 outcomes, then here's the program to deliver that. Now, some of council spend is always going to be on other things, not those 4 priorities, because of our statutory responsibilities, but it's just trying to shift the dial towards the bulk of expenditure. For instance, we've got a massive shift in expenditure upwards for marae development, as you know, so making sure that that's delivered well and is defensible, because when we start granting money to marae, we need to make sure that we're doing so in an even-handed manner and that we have our policies backed up so that people can see what we're doing, why and how to apply and what they might be eligible for. So all of those things are in train. We don't have the final detail to show you today, but we did undertake to bring a report to you, to this committee, so that's essentially why we're here today for this PwC report.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a mover and a seconder, please?
Oh.
I'll second it. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? They're good. Right, well, we'll move on to Rose. To report number 10.
Chair, just briefly to introduce this report, so we're shifting from the PwC, which was looking forward, to now looking backwards at the 2017-18 year for the Auckland Council Group. So this is a little bit of an omnibus report that I'm presenting to you on behalf of the Māori Outcomes Steering Group from across the whole Auckland Council Group and CCOs. I do actually wanted to just say to you, if in this report there are questions which are relating to CCOs that you might have, can you please hold those questions for when the CCOs come in, because I won't and the team won't be able to answer those. The team at the podium right now is the Auckland Council parent, if you like. So if you've got questions on CCO activity, can you hold those for when the CCOs come in later on in the day? However, they have input into this report. All of the words that are in there are theirs, that relate to their activity. And just going on to sort of the crux of the matter, really, this has been a real year of revising our outcomes, as I was saying before. We've got outcomes for the next 10 years, but there's 4 in particular that the ELG, the executive team across the group, have asked us to focus on, which I've mentioned are Te Reo, marae development, Māori economic development, and water kaitiakitanga areas. So last time we met with you at the joint IMSB-GB, you said to us that there really wasn't enough detail in the report. We're hoping today that there's detail enough. but your feedback on that would be appreciated. We trust that what we've given you is enough an example to give you a feel for the programs themselves, but I just wanted to say that not all activity is included in this report. These are examples of those programs. And otherwise, I take open for questions. Thank you.
Member Toby.
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so the budget shows a shortfall of like 15%, I think 1.3 million. Doesn't actually say why.
Yes.
Why that is.
Okay, through the chair, there's 800k of that is actually allocated to marae development, so it actually brings the underspend down quite a lot. So, it's allocated, it just hasn't gone out the door yet, which leaves us with about 563k across the group. So when you take it across the group, it's still an underspend, but it's not a large underspend, so we've really lifted our game, but I do acknowledge it is an underspend still.
Yeah, I accept it's not a major variance, but it just doesn't really say why it was. And so it's indicating it's like to carry forward around 700k. Is that for that purpose?
Yes, for marae development.
Yeah. So what about the other 600?
I
Where's
think
that gone?
it's fair to say that some of the programs, when we've budgeted for them, we've delivered them for less money than we anticipated. So we're not intending to carry forward any more than the 800k.
So they didn't spend it.
So what will happen to that 600 if it's not been spent?
It usually is spent on other projects or programs within that department.
In the Māori Outcomes program or not?
Well, some of them, as the report sort of points out, not all projects are exactly budgeted for, and all Māori outcomes are not that easy to capture in all projects. So the intention is that money goes towards Māori outcomes. It might still go towards Māori outcomes, but on a different project that it just hadn't been captured. It's not an exact science, I guess, is what I'm trying to say to you.
So, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, so it's through like basically by Te Toa Takatini portfolio or something? We'll go through that or what?
We have a centralised budget, yes, it can go through there. Any major underspend within one part of the council family.
Okay, just one other question. There's sort of no mention of the next report on this. Is there any chance of getting a further report, like we've already agreed to do one for the PwC stuff in May 2019? So can we get a report back then as well?
On
the revised Māori Outcomes portfolio?
Yes. Yes, we can do that.
Do we need to, through you, Mr. Chairman, do we need to have that as a resolution or a motion?
We can add that. Yep.
So,
Rose, will you just prepare something, some words, we'll add that as a B.
you okay?
Member Hannah.
Chair, just a supplementary really to David's question about, so if money is not spent, that particular budget will roll over to some other Māori project?
It's at the manager's, through the chair, at the manager's discretion where that money gets spent. But often when they've put up that budget, they anticipated to spend X amount of dollars, and they might not have spent quite that amount of money but still achieve the outcome. Therefore, that money would be at that manager's discretion about how to spend that money. That's when we're getting into the rats and mice of some of these allocations.
What do you mean when you say it's not an exact science? I would have thought that it's pretty exact.
Budgets, of course, are known to those managers, but when we say, for instance, cost up a project, we might have estimated that it cost $100,000 to deliver something. Sometimes we deliver exactly what we needed for 90k. That 10,000 then looks like an underspend. It's just that we've spent that money well.
So if let's say that if you, the total budget, let's just pull a figure out of the hat, there's $1 million specifically for Māori outcomes, okay? If it is, or, it's just a number. and you only spend, I don't know, let's say half of that, is the rest earmarked for, of that $1 million budget, is the half that's not spent, go back into the consolidated fund, or is it spent on other Māori outcomes? I'm just trying to get my head around where the non-spend goes. Does it evaporate?
Through the chair. It doesn't evaporate. If it's a small amount of money, that manager would use that money for other things. But if it's a large amount of money...
I know the other things, but I just want you to tell me whether it's for other Māori outcomes or whether it goes back into the pot to be spent on something else in the council spend.
At the moment, it doesn't go back into the pot. At the moment, it's at the discretion of that manager, who may use it for Māori outcomes, some other program that they have, or something else.
Sweet. Thank you.
Councillor Newman.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and I just wondered if you could expand on that, if you give me an example of a project whereby the project costs came in lower than what was anticipated, so the manager, whoever he or she may be, went and reallocated that. And give me an example of that, and give me an example of how that discretion is applied so that the funding is reallocated, because it all looks a bit vague to me. So could you maybe just give me some context?
I can't give you an example right now. I'm sorry.
Presumably, if the budget is set, it's set because there are a whole series of bids for activities that will take place within a given period. So, what is the internal review process to determine, well, okay, if we're getting a whole lot of unders, actually we need to do budget reforecasting, because you're saying that the funding doesn't go back into the council's consolidated funding envelope, it stays within the manager's budget. But if you're hitting unders against budget, then presumably the forecasting was not right to begin with.
So if you're talking about going forward, we now have a centralised fund for Māori outcomes, which the Māori Outcomes Steering Group has oversight of, and people pitch into, and if there was any money underspent in that, would go back into the centralised pot. This report is about the year prior.
Yep.
So there has been, with any budget, with any manager's budget, there will be unders and overs. So that's what's happened in the past.
And so in the future, the manager won't be able to keep the unders, well, the balance, if we're under, they'll all go back to you?
If the money has come from the Māori Outcomes budget, yes, that will come back to the Māori Outcomes Steering Group for reprioritisation. Some managers, though, will still have money in their budgets to deliver things as part of a build, if you like, a project, and there'll be some Māori design elements. Those are not centralised budgets, so that manager would still have discretion over that budget.
Are they operational or capital, or a bit of both, or?
Mostly operational.
Mostly, well, there's a real mix of OPEX and CAPEX in there.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Just looking through, there's some really good initiatives or work being done. A lot of the face-to-face stuff about youth and things like that is very southern focused, and I guess I'm just hoping that with the Western initiative we might end up having some Māori focused work with youth, because I look at this and it's all of it's pretty much, it's for the Southern Initiative, and it feels very like it's ignoring the second highest Māori population, which is in the West. And I know it's probably not the intention, but hopefully, is there been any kind of work with Gail Surgener in that starting development of Western Initiative around doing some of this trades training or any of that kind of employment work through this process?
Through the chair.
I'm concerned there's a huge population, it feels like it's not being touched.
That work has only just started, really, particularly with the Western Initiative, and it's very early days yet. More work with other community groups out west, and that's undertaken through the engagement strategy as well, which is also only just standing up. So there are definitely going to be
Progress.
more progress in that area. And just to add that that's TWA, Te Waka Angamua, have concentrated our efforts out west and out south. So that's, and that's on the basis that that was the largest Māori populations in the city. So we made a deliberate decision to go and do that. So.
Cool. I guess part of my comment comes a lot of the, we've done Māori design here and there, but it might be a new market, it might be somewhere else where, yes, that's nice to see, and it does help, you know, for people to see that and for Māori to see that's in the design. But yeah, I'm definitely looking to see more work done where the people live. But if that's your intention and that's where you're going, that's great. Thank you.
Member Taupiri, would you like to move, given you've
Yeah, I
added
will.
the B?
Yes, I will.
All right, we'll just second it, please.
Happy to second.
Well, Fletcher. All those in favour?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Right, we'll